Manchester United are facing a tough January with no budget for signings unless players are sold. Rashford could be set for a shock loan move. Antony and Zirkzee plus others are all linked with exits. Amorim prioritises a left wing-back and a forward signing. Nuno Mendes wants to join United, and scouts are monitoring Porto. And this plus all the latest Manchester United news and transfer news. We'll keep you right up to date with everything. Welcome to Man United Review. My name's Jamie. Before we get into it, please smash a like on the video. And let's jump straight into it. And Happy New Year as well, everybody. I genuinely wish you all the best for 2025. And I want the best for United as well. So let's go through all the noise. So we know we're in a position where United need to sell to buy. Our finances are in the dirt. You know, that's pretty obvious from all the cuts that we've been making to like charities and job losses and things like that as well. There is actually a really interesting piece I'm going to bring you right at the end regarding the projected income for United actually being not as bad as what people are making out to be at the moment. But let's go through all the kind of news. So Man United have no budget to reinforce their flagging squad in the January transfer window. United invested £206.6 million in 5 signings in the summer, and that has left them without the finances to strengthen next month. Club sources have stressed United would have to sell to buy amid their struggles to comply with the Premier League's profit and sustainability rules and financial fair play. An external source said United can't do anything without movement from their squad. And that came from Samu Aghehowa, who is a shit stirrer, but he's connected. And Ruben Amorim himself in his post-match press conference after the Newcastle defeat said it himself as well. So I do think that that's a believable story. Chris Hurst from the Times said that Manchester United may sign 1 or 2 players in January, but only if players are either sold or loaned out to create space within the squad and the wage bill. So that's a decent source. So all roads are pointing towards Manchester United being in a position where we have to sell or remove some players, whether that's the wages, in order to bring in additions in January, which is not impossible because there are a few players that have been linked with exits. Whether they're all realistic within January, I have my doubts, because when we go through, you'll understand what I mean by that in a second. But let's go through all the potential links with exits and then some of the kind of incoming latest rumours. So first one that's pretty obvious that we could look to remove in January is Marcus Rashford. Not been in any of the last, he's been in one of the squads in the last 5 games. Clearly somebody that Amorim doesn't want or doesn't fancy, or whether Ineos don't want or fancy him. There's something that's kind of happened. I keep saying it behind the scenes. I think regarding Marcus, he's obviously come out himself and said that he is ready for a new challenge. The problem with Rashford will be his wages. So that the Mail have said that Marcus Rashford may have to be a loan move with an obligation to buy at the end of the season. So that's kind of, with a loan with Marcus, I don't mind doing a loan with an obligation to buy. If you want to get rid of him and they want to move him on, which they clearly seem like they want to do, a loan with an obligation to buy is not the end of the world. It would just come down to how much of his wages we would have to pay as to whether that would help us for the January transfer window. If we're loaning him, we're paying 70% of his wages. It doesn't really make too much difference. But if it's a 50-50 split, because he's on £300,000 a week plus, that would actually be quite a big difference for and potentially help us out in the January market. United are planning to Man United are open to allowing Marcus Rashford to leave on a permanent or loan deal, while they will state that they want teams to pay his wages. It would likely be the starting point in initial negotiations. So again, that came from Paul Hurst in the Times, good source, effectively saying a similar thing where they would allow Marcus to go out on loan. The start point in the negotiations is that you have to pay his full wages, which I don't think many teams across Europe are going to be capable of doing. And it was a similar situation with Sancho, if you remember back when we loaned him out to Dortmund, where the problem was his wages, and we had to pay a significant chunk of his wages while he went out in Dortmund before we could get a solution for him in the summer, which is obviously that loan with an obligation to buy what he's currently got at Chelsea. So we could see something like that as well, which kind of shows it doesn't necessarily help us out for January. It would help us out massively in the summer. So obviously that there is benefit of doing that particular deal, but it just kind of shows Marcus Rashford's stock within the club, where they're happy to, effectively sanction a loan with an obligation to buy, and potentially will end up having to pay a lot of his wages, which doesn't necessarily help us massively. But that's why I kind of keep saying I think there's something that's happening behind the scenes with Marcus, where they do just want him out of the way. But let me know what you think about that in the comments. Now, the other player we could be looking to move on in January is Casemiro. Bought you news yesterday saying that Casemiro wants to move to Saudi Arabia in January. The Saudi Sovereign Wealth Fund are also determined to move forward with his signing in January and want him at Al Nassr. That came from a very pretty decent Brazilian outlet, so that's one to keep an eye on potentially for January. That would obviously free up a massive amount of wages as well, which would be helpful to go towards potential incomings in the January transfer window. Another player we could look to move on potentially is Lindelof. However, there's not really that much interest in him. He's injured as well, so conveniently got another injury through a transfer window. But according to the latest that I could find was Romano saying that the rumours linking Victor Lindelof to Leicester City are without any factual reality. Romano has claimed that Leicester have not been in contact with Lindelof. If anything, the defender will look elsewhere if he leaves United, because there were some links recently with him potentially going to Leicester and linking back up with Ruud van Nistelrooy, but not very likely. The problem with Lindelof is he's only got 6 months left on his contract, so he's a free agent in the summer. He's on a big wage as well. Is he really going to want to take a wage cut at this moment when he can sit on that big wage for the next 6 months and then get a signing on bonus and get a better deal for himself in the summer? So I think it's unlikely. I think we would look to sell Lindelof, or maybe even terminate his contract and just to get him off the books in January. But it's just where you're going to get that interest from. But potentially a player that could be moved on in January. Another one is Antony. There's been more news around Real Betis. So Real Betis want to sign Antony on loan in January. He is aware of the interest. Betis need to sell Asani Diao before they can enter negotiations with Manchester United. The Spanish side will also need to pay part of Antony's wages. So it's a bit similar to Rashford, where because he's on 200 grand a week, it's going to be a bit of a loan. If it includes some kind of option or an obligation to buy, I would definitely do that deal just to kind of at least remove him out of the equation in the January transfer window. Diao's an interesting one though. We were heavily linked with him at one point in time. We were scouting him a lot. I think it was more under Ten Hag and maybe before Ineos came in as well. It was more like last year. But he's an interesting player, Diao, that they want to sell in order to maybe bring in Antony on loan. So that would be interesting. I don't know if he would necessarily fit Amorim's system, but he was a player that we were heavily linked with in the past. So that's really interesting to say that they want to get rid of Diao and bring in Antony when we've been linked with Diao in the past. So that would be one to watch. Now another player we could potentially look to move on is Zirkzee. Juventus are getting closer to a deal to sign Joshua Zirkzee on loan from Manchester United until the end of the season. Again, coming from Tuttosport, who are not the most credible. So, I would say take that one with a pinch of salt. But we have had, if you remember back a couple of days ago, there was a few more credible kind of journalists that were potentially linking Zirkzee with a move back to Italy. Whether his mind would have been changed after, what went on with the Newcastle game, him getting subbed after 32 minutes, was it, coming off, and obviously then getting booed as well, which still doesn't feel right for me. I just hope with that, the next time he plays at Old Trafford, he gets the biggest cheer just to kind of rebuild his confidence back up, because I don't know if it was the fans necessarily booing him or just angry with the performance in general at that time, and he just had to take it on the chin. But yeah, I would say take that story with a pinch of salt. But there's been a few other stories regarding Zirkzee. So Joshua Zirkzee is aware of the interest from Italy, but is fully focused on his season with Manchester United and has no desire to leave as he concentrates on playing a role in moving the team up the table. That came from the Daily Mail, and the Mirror was saying that Ruben Amorim is unlikely to sanction Zirkzee's departure unless at least one new attacking signing has been made. And I kind of feel that with Zirkzee as well. Removing him, unless he wants to, unless he asks to go, and then obviously we might facilitate it, but the attacking position is going to be expensive in January. A lot of teams are not going to want to lose top-class forwards halfway through a season, and it's a problem area for us anyway, and then weakening in it without getting replacements in would be really kind of, it'd be really difficult to do, I think, in January. But it's one to keep an eye on, because obviously with the situation that happened against the Newcastle game. But I'd like him, his type of character, if he did want to kind of prove himself, and hopefully that could, motivate him to actually see some performances from him as well. But let me know what you think about that in the comments. Now, another player that's been linked with an exit is Garnacho. So despite all the noise around Rashford, Garnacho's value is actually greater based on his higher transfer fee and lower wages. United could sell him for more and not have the problem of paying off a huge contract that still has 3.5 years left to run, that came from Chris Wheeler, who is he is quite a credible source, I would say. Daily Mail are like shit stirrers sometimes though as well, but Chris Wheeler can be fairly accurate. I think he was quite accurate with the Jared Braithwaite stuff in the summer, if I remember rightly, effectively kind of saying, well, Garnacho is a better value player to sell than Marcus Rashford because he's on a lower wage, and you could potentially get more money for him as well, because there would be more takers for Garnacho than there would Rashford, because Garnacho's actually, he's younger, he's got more development in him, he was in the top 6 Golden Boy Awards, just won the Puskas Awards as well. Do you know what I mean? So he would actually hold more value, plus he's on a lower wage, so there would be more interest in Garnacho than Rashford, which is probably understandable. And then he also went on to say that while Manchester United are unlikely to sell Alejandro Garnacho, a combination of factors such as low wages, high market value, and tactical fit would give offers a level of consideration. So, that could be one to keep an eye on, but I don't know if United are in a position where they want to kind of sell all of their forwards. If Rashford's going to go, we're light anyway up front with Mount being injured. Obviously Rashford not in favour, Garnacho not in favour at the moment as well. We are light in that kind of attacking area. If you then, sell Zirkzee or loan Zirkzee out, get rid of Rashford, get rid of Garnacho, like, we're leaving ourselves with a massive hole in a problem area, because one of our biggest issues going back more than just this season, last season as well, is scoring goals. And if you get rid of all your forwards and don't bring anybody in, we're just cutting our nose off to spite our face, I think. And getting forwards in January is going to be really, really difficult. But we'll go through all the incomings. But let me know what you think about the exits or potential exits in the comments. So, Ruben Amorim is keen on making a signing in January, with left-back being the main target. I think that's pretty obvious. Manchester United's main left wing-back target is Nuno Mendes. PSG want to extend his contract, but may be willing to sell him if he is reluctant to re-sign. So another kind of story suggesting that the kind of contract situation with Mendes is PSG have offered him a contract. Apparently United have offered him a better contract. And then we're at that kind of position where either PSG might offer him more money and he'll stay at PSG, or if he rejects that contract, PSG might be then willing to sell him because his value is going to decrease in the summer, because he'll only have a year left on his contract there. So that's a really interesting one to keep an eye on. Peter Hall from the iPaper, who I would say, hitty-missy journalist, saying that Nuno Mendes wants to join Manchester United. So definite interest, I think, in Nuno Mendes. Ruben Amorim wants a left wing back in the January transfer window, and there is also a desire to sign a forward, either a striker or an attacking midfielder. And I do think that's a problem area as well. Goals, we can't really do anything at the moment. We're conceding goals and can't score goals, and that's why we're in the position that we are. But again, getting a forward in would be really difficult. But Rich Fay's a decent source as well when it comes to United news. So potentially, just to kind of do a bit of summary there, there's the potential for Manchester United to make some sales in January. The problem we've got is the wages that we're offering the players, because I think they would look to move on Eriksen as well. But again, he's on a big contract. Is he going to want to take a pay cut in January to go somewhere, or do we terminate his contract so he can leave on a free now, just to get him off the books ahead of the January transfer window? Obviously, Casemiro mentioned there, Antony, Rashford, Garnacho. There are a few deals that Manchester United could potentially do. A lot of it depends, though, on, we're not going to get massive transfer fees for those players. Not all of them anyway. I think Garnacho would kind of represent the highest value in terms of profit for the club. Maybe Rashford as well, but again, you've got to factor in his wages. But it's whether we're obviously not going to do all of them, though. That's ridiculous. That would be difficult to do in the summer transfer window, let alone in a January transfer window where clubs are skin and everyone's looking at FFP and positions in the league and all of these kind of things. So it would be really difficult, but there is potentially some movement that we could make in terms of outgoings. And then in terms of incomings, it looks like the latest is definitely went left wing back. I think anyone with half an eye could see that United are crying out for a left wing back. We have been for a year, effectively, or not necessarily a left wing back, but a left fullback for sure. We've been crying out for a while, and then potentially a forward as well, which is interesting. Now, in terms of forwards, one of the strikers we've been heavily linked with recently is Victor Osimhen. So Chris Wheeler was saying that there is a clause in Victor Osimhen's Galatasaray loan deal allowing Napoli to recall him in January and sell him if the right offer comes in. But Manchester United sources believe it is unlikely they could sign someone with his profile and salary at the moment. So Osimhen, I've mentioned this before, it's not really a January deal unless we do a madness and sell all of those players that we mentioned before, because that would free up a shit ton of money per week and also generate some income, so we could get Osimhen. So it's not impossible. It's just very, very unlikely that we're going to get all of those deals done in the January transfer window. But, we'll keep an eye on it for you. And then this story was really interesting. So Manchester United have scouts at Porto's win over Boavista at the weekend as they continue to assess what, if any, transfer business can be done in January. United were watching Samu Aghehowa, who scored twice for Porto's 4-0 win. Now, that's not the first time we've been linked with Samu. If you remember, that guy absolutely destroyed us in the Europa League, scoring the 2 goals when we played away at Porto in one of the one of those typical Ten Hag games that we were 2-0 up in, and then we ended up drawing 3-3 with the last minute. Was it Maguire that scored the last minute? Kind of equaliser. We went from 2-0 up to 3-2 down and then scored a last minute goal. And the interesting thing about that is we've been linked with him before. So there's been some credible sources that have said that we've been scouting a lot of Porto's games. The Muppeteers, though, who are a decent source, also posted saying to keep an eye on this one because there could be something in it. And like I said, he's a really good player. 20 years old, and let me look at his stats. 19 appearances, 18 goals and 2 assists. So 20 goal contributions in 19 appearances, and he's 20 years old. The problem with that, though, it says in the report, potentially in January, right? But he's got a €100 million release clause at Porto. Atletico own 50% of his transfer rights as well, which means they're entitled to half of what Porto sell him for. That's a really complicated deal to do. That's a really expensive one to do as well, because I think his contract runs out in 2029. So I don't think, I would say that's a summer deal potentially, unless we do some, I don't know, a madness because Atletico's linked with Garnacho. Do we do a deal with that and say, okay, well, we want to bring in Samu? And will you do a deal with the kind of sell-on clause? They're way too complicated. Way too complicated, that, I think, for the January transfer window as well. So I would say, I think there is interest in that player, but definitely more of a summer deal than it is a January one, because he's going to be way expensive. And like I said, because Atletico have that 50% sell-on clause, we're going to want more money for him as well, and it's unlikely for the January is what I would say, but definitely a player to keep an eye on. I would put him with the potential striker summer targets. I think Osimhen would be one we would be interested in. Obviously, Victor Gyökeres is the standout one with the fact we were scouting him anyway. His links with Amorim. I think Benjamin Sesko is another one. We're always linked with Benjamin Sesko. There's clear interest in him, and I would put Samu up with those kind of potential striker signings for the summer as well. But let me know what you think about that in the comments. Now, another player we could look to bring in on the cheap would be Dani Olmo. So Dani Olmo's agent, Andy Barra, said the decision is made by Dani to stay at Barcelona. He wants to play for Barcelona. That's what Fabrizio Romano said. They are not considering any other options. Dani wants to play for Barcelona, says his agent. From Romano, that came out earlier yesterday. Because if you remember with Dani Olmo, if Barcelona don't register him by last night, he's available on a free, and they haven't managed to register him. Romano said later on, La Liga rejects Barcelona's appeal to register Manchester United target Dani Olmo. And that doesn't necessarily mean that he wants to leave, because Barcelona might still be able to do some kind of deal, pull a lever, and get money in order to kind of register him. But as it stands at the moment, he is a free agent. That would definitely be one that I would be all over for January. But is he really going to want to leave Barcelona and come to Man United that are 14th in the league and potentially in a bit of a relegation battle? Probably not, I would say, unless you offer him a bucket ton of money. But then we've been down that road before, so it's an exciting kind of potential opportunity for United to go out and get in a forward number 10 to kind of come in that would massively help our creativity and help us going forward. But I don't know how realistic it is, but we'll keep an eye on it because, you know, I'd never say never in football, but let me know what you think about that in the comments. And then the final story I've got for you, this was actually quite complicated, but it came from the Mail, saying that global investment bankers USB say the arrival of Sir Jim Ratcliffe and Ineos at Manchester United should eventually see the fallen giants return to the top. USB predicts a return to the top 4 in Champions League football within 4 seasons and vast revenues that could break the £1 billion barrier. They believe the club's share price is undervalued and recommend that potential investors buy now. It was quite a complicated piece, but what it's effectively saying is that the investment firms are predicting with the finances and the cuts and, you know, everything like that, the potential stadium and all of these things, that United's revenue could go up to £1 billion in the future, which would obviously then help us buy players and do all the kind of infrastructure and stuff like that as well, which could then potentially see United get back into the Champions League and back potentially, you know, in the top 4 within the next few years. Now, that's really interesting because that's from a financial perspective. But the problem I had with that is, well, it's all very well and good getting the money in, but we've got to spend it on the right players. You've got to recruit right. You've got to sell right. That's the main kind of issue at United, not necessarily, you know, just the financial mess that the Glazers have left us in, but also the fact that we've wasted all of that money because we've spent money. We've been able to spend money all this time under the Glazers. It's just we've spent it on dog shit instead of getting the right players in at the right fee and giving them the right contracts at the right time as well. That's been a massive issue. But interesting that an investment firm would kind of predict that United are going to get back. So there could be a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel. But let me know what you think about that in the comments. Let me know what you think about all the other topics discussed in today's video. That's you all up to date with the latest Manchester United news and transfer news. Smash a like on the video on your way out. Subscribe to the channel if you are new. See you in the next one.